The gold wedding band felt cold against Alani's finger as she reached for the hotel room door. "Where are you going?" Zhang Yuan's voice was quiet behind her. She turned. The man she had married just 3 hours ago stood between her and freedom, his face half hidden in shadow. She'd only met him twice before today. Once at the blues club where she worked. Once at the restaurant where he'd offered her the contract. "To my room," she said, gripping her suitcase tighter. "Like we agreed." His eyes, dark and unreadable, moved to the window. The curtains were drawn, but his body tensed like he could see through them. Like he knew something was out there. "There's been a change of plans." His hands trembled slightly as he removed his suit jacket. Not desire. Not anger. Fear. Alani felt her stomach drop. What change? He stepped closer. Not threatening, but deliberately blocking her path. "You can't leave this bed tonight." He nodded toward the king-sized mattress dominating the room. "Someone is watching us." She looked from the bed to the man she'd just promised herself to on paper. Her grip tightened on the suitcase handle until it squeaked. "What exactly do you mean, someone is watching?" Yuan's jaw tightened. "If you walk out that door right now, we're both dead by morning." "Hold up. If you have not watched part 1, stop right here. Click the card on your screen or check the link in the description. Go watch part 1 first. This will not make sense without it. For everyone else, welcome back. You remember where we left off, right?" Alani signed the contract. Married a stranger. And on their wedding night, that stranger blocked the door and said 5 words that changed everything. "Someone is watching us." But here is what I did not tell you in part 1. That night, Alani woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of screaming. Yuan was thrashing in the sheets, clawing at his own throat, crying in a language she could not understand. And when she finally woke him up, he grabbed her wrist so hard it left bruises. Then he told her what really happened 3 years ago. What they did to him. Why he cannot be with a woman. And why his own uncle wants him dead. This is part 2. And trust me, you are not ready. Let us get into it. "You deserve to know what you've walked into," Yuan said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stood by the window, peering through a tiny gap in the curtains at the night city below. His shoulders were tight with tension. "My name isn't just Zhang Yuan. It's Han Zhang Yuan. My father was Han Suzhong." Alani sat on the edge of the bed, trying to keep her voice steady. "Should that name mean something to me? In Seoul, it means everything." He turned to face her. "When people talk about the Korean Mafia, they're talking about my family. My father built an empire, shipping, real estate, nightclubs. Some legal. Some not." He took a deep breath. 3 years ago, my father died. The business should have gone to my uncle, his brother. But my father left everything to me. 1 week later, I was taken. Taken? Kidnapped. They kept me for 3 days. His voice became clinical, detached. They said it was about business. Territorial disputes. But it wasn't. It was a message from my uncle. Yuan's fingers unconsciously moved to his throat, as though feeling phantom hands there. "What they did to me in that basement, the doctor said some damage can't be repaired." His eyes finally met hers. "In my world, a man who can't produce heirs is considered weak. Temporary. My uncle has been waiting, watching, looking for proof that I'm broken. And that's where I come in," Alani said, understanding dawning. "A wife makes you look stable. Complete. Yes." His voice softened. "But I didn't tell you how dangerous it would be. I didn't tell you they'd be watching. And for that, I'm sorry. If you're feeling the tension building, I need you to do something real quick. This story took a lot of time to put together, and I want to make sure you don't miss what happens next. Take a second to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every comment, and I love seeing how far these stories reach. Alright, now let's go back to the beginning and see how Alani ended up in this impossible situation. 3 weeks earlier. The Blue Note on Beale Street was packed, even for a Thursday night. Blue and purple neon lights cut through cigarette smoke. A saxophone wailed somewhere near the back. Tourists bumped into each other, drinks sloshing. Alani Booker wiped down the sticky bar counter and tried not to think about the paper crumpled in her apron pocket. Final eviction notice. She had 2 weeks before she and her grandmother would be out on the street. Alani. Her manager's voice cut through the noise. VIPs at table 4. Don't screw it up. She grabbed her tray and weaved through the crowd. Table 4 was in the corner, prime real estate, away from the speakers but with a clear view of the stage. 3 men in suits sat there, looking nothing like the usual tourists. 2 of them were clearly security, scanning the room, back straight, barely touching their drinks. But the third man was different. He sat perfectly still. Unnaturally still. Like someone who had trained himself never to show what he was thinking. His suit probably cost more than Alani's rent. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that missed nothing. Welcome to the Blue Note, Alani said, raising her voice over the music. What can I get you tonight? The security men ordered whiskey. The still man just looked at her. Water, he said finally. His voice was soft, with an accent she couldn't quite place. No ice. As she wrote it down, she felt him studying her. You've worked here long, he said. Not a question. A statement. 2 years, Alani answered cautiously. Why? The question caught her off guard. Customers didn't usually care why she did anything. I need the money, she said simply. He nodded once, like she'd confirmed something. You don't belong here. Before she could respond to that strange comment, he looked away. Dismissal. She left to get their drinks. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of orders and tips and drunk tourists. But she felt his eyes on her throughout the night. Not in the creepy way she was used to from men in bars. Something different. Assessing. Calculating. When she brought their check, the security men were gone. Just the still man remained. He handed her a black credit card. Han Group International, she read from the card. My company, he said. She ran the card and brought back the receipt. He'd left a $200 tip on a $40 tab. This is too much, she said. No. It's not enough. He stood. Thank you for the service, Alani Booker. She frowned. How do you know my last name? But he was already walking away. After closing, Alani leaned against the brick wall behind the club, letting the cool night air wash over her. Her phone buzzed. New email. She almost deleted it without looking, probably spam about weight loss or cheap insurance. But the subject line caught her eye. Subject, domestic service opportunity, international placement. She opened it. Confidential recruitment for high-paying domestic position in Seoul, South Korea. Room and board provided. Health benefits include dependent coverage. Memphis recruitment session tomorrow at Juniper House Restaurant, 2 p.m. International work would mean leaving her grandmother. But the email mentioned dependent coverage. Maybe this was the break they needed. She checked the sender. Han Recruitment Services. The same name as the credit card. This wasn't a coincidence. The next day, Alani stood outside Juniper House Restaurant in her only nice blouse and borrowed heels. The place screamed money, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters who looked more expensive than the customers. A woman in a dark suit met her at the door. Ms. Booker? This way, please. She was led to a private room where a few other women waited. They all looked nervous. Young. Attractive. Desperate in that careful way people try to hide. A presentation began. Housekeeping position in Seoul. Good salary. Room and board included. 1-year contract. Strict confidentiality required. When it ended, the woman in the suit touched Alani's arm. Our client would like to speak with you privately. She was led to another room. Smaller. More intimate. And there, sitting alone at the table, was the still man from the club. Ms. Booker, he said. Thank you for coming. You sent that email, she said. You were watching me. I was evaluating you. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please. Sit. She should have walked out. Everything about this screamed danger. But the eviction notice in her pocket weighed her down. She sat. My name is Jang Wyan, he said. I own several companies in Seoul. He slid a folder across the table. This is not a housekeeping position. This is a marriage contract. Alani stared at him. Excuse me? 1 year, he continued, as if discussing the weather. In public, you would be my wife. Attend events. Be seen at my home. In private, separate rooms. Separate lives. Your own space. Your boundaries respected. She opened the folder. The first page showed a payment schedule that made her dizzy. Why would you need a fake wife? She asked, looking up. You're rich, successful. She gestured at his perfect suit, his confident posture. Something flashed across his face. Something raw and painful that vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. In my position, he said carefully, a man is expected to have a family. Stability. Without it, there are vulnerabilities. So this is about business. Yes. Too quick. A lie. And what exactly is your business, Mr. Jang? He met her eyes. I think you should know exactly what you're walking into. My family's company operates in both legal and illegal spheres. Shipping. Real estate. Entertainment venues. Some call it organized crime. I call it survival. She should have run. Right then. The contract guarantees your safety, he continued. You will not be asked to participate in anything illegal. When our year ends, you walk away with enough money to clear all your debts and set up a new life. How do you know about my debts? He didn't answer that. So I pretend for a year, she said, trying to wrap her mind around it. Live in your house. Smile for photos. Go to dinner parties. Yes. And there are no physical expectations? His face went completely blank. No. I am not asking for that. I cannot, he stopped. Corrected himself. I will not cross that line. The shift from cannot to will not told her more than he probably intended. Why me? She asked. Out of all the women in Memphis? Because I've been watching you for 6 months, he said simply. The way you care for your grandmother. The way you keep your dignity despite difficult circumstances. You have strength most people lack. It was both flattering and terrifying that this stranger had been monitoring her life. And if I say no? Then you walk out that door, and we never speak again. He nodded toward the exit. No consequences. No hard feelings. Alani looked at the contract. The numbers were huge. Enough to pay for her grandmother's care at the best facility in the city. Enough to clear her student loans. Enough to start over when the year was done. I need time to think, she said. You have 24 hours. He handed her a business card with a phone number. Call this number with your answer by tomorrow night. Voice call only. That night, Alani sat at her kitchen table, the contract spread out before her. Her grandmother was already asleep in the bedroom, the oxygen machine humming its steady rhythm. The offer was insane. Marry a stranger. Move to Korea. Pretend to be the wife of a man who was basically admitting he was in the Mafia. But their apartment was falling apart. The medical bills kept piling up. And her grandmother deserved better than this, better than struggling to breathe, better than watching her granddaughter sacrifice her future. At 11:51 p.m., Alani called the number. Wyan answered on the first ring. Yes? I have questions, she said. Ask. Is this dangerous? Really dangerous? A pause. Not directly to you. But my world has risks. And my grandmother will be taken care of? Starting immediately? The first payment will process within 1 hour of your signature. Alani took a deep breath. Then I'm saying yes. There was a soft exhale on the other end of the line. Relief, maybe. A car will pick you up tomorrow at 9 a.m., he said. Bring the signed contract. The line went dead. Alani stared at the signature page for a long moment before picking up a pen. Her hands shook slightly as she wrote her name. She had just agreed to be the fake wife of a man she barely knew, in a country she'd never visited, for a life she couldn't imagine. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that she had just signed her name to more than a contract. She had signed her name to a war. Alani stood outside Juniper House restaurant feeling way out of place. This spot was too fancy for her. Big chandeliers hung from the ceiling. People in expensive clothes sat at tables eating tiny food. She wore her only nice shirt and shoes she'd borrowed from a friend at work. Her hands were sweaty as she held her purse. A woman in a black suit walked up to her. Ms. Booker? Follow me. Alani walked behind her to a room where other women were waiting. They all looked nervous, just like her. The woman started talking about a job in Seoul, Korea. Good pay. A place to live. Health insurance that would cover family members too. After she finished talking, the woman touched Alani's arm. Our client wants to talk to you alone. Alani's heart beat faster as she was led to another room. And there he was, the man from the blues club. He sat at a table, looking serious. You came, he said. You're the client? Alani asked. I thought this was about cleaning houses. That was just to find the right person. He pointed to the chair across from him. Please sit. Alani sat down slowly. Everything about this felt weird, but she stayed anyway. The man put a folder on the table. My name is Jang Wyan. What I'm offering isn't a cleaning job. It's something else. He opened the folder. Inside was a contract, a photo of her, when did he get that, and other papers. I need a wife, he said. Not a real one. Just for show. Alani stared at him. A wife? For 1 year, he explained. In public, you'd be my wife. Go to places with me. Be seen at my house. But in private, you'd have your own space. Your own life. Why would someone like you need to fake being married? Something flashed across his face. Pain, maybe. In my world, a man needs to look stable. Having a wife helps with that. What exactly is your world? She asked. He looked right at her. I own companies in Seoul. Some legal, some not so legal. Some people call it organized crime. Some call it business. She should have run right then. But instead she asked, so this is about making your business look good? Yes. He answered too fast. Like he'd practiced it. Alani looked at the money details in the contract. The numbers were huge. Way more than she'd ever seen. This would pay off all your bills, he said. Your grandmother could get the best care. When our year is done, you'd have enough to start over. How do you know about my grandmother? He didn't answer. Instead he said, 6 months ago, I saw you on Beale Street. It was raining. An old woman fell. Everyone walked past, but you stopped. You helped her up. Called her a cab. Paid for it yourself. Alani remembered that day. You've been watching me since then? Looking for the right person, he said. Someone who cares about others. Someone strong enough for this job. She swallowed hard. And what exactly would I have to do? Live in my home. Go to places as my wife. That's all. That's all, she repeated. No, other stuff? His face changed. Something raw showed for a second before he covered it up. I'm not asking for that, he said quietly. I cannot, he stopped. I will not cross that line. The way he changed from cannot to will not made her wonder. And if I say no? Then you walk out that door and we never talk again. He nodded to the exit. No hard feelings. Alani stared at the contract. The money would fix everything. Her grandmother's medical bills. Their rent. Her school loans. Everything. I need time to think, she said. You have until tomorrow night. He gave her a business card. Call this number with your answer. Back at her apartment, Alani put the contract on her kitchen table after her grandmother went to sleep. The place was small, just one bedroom that her grandmother used while Alani slept on a pull-out couch. The oxygen machine hummed in the bedroom. Bills were piled on the counter. The eviction notice stuck to the fridge. Her head was spinning. Marry a stranger? Move to Korea? Pretend to be someone's wife for a year? But then she thought about Sunrise Gardens, the nice place they'd checked out last year for her grandmother. The place they could never afford. With this money, her grandmother could go there. Get better care. Not have to worry. Later that night, Alani talked to her grandmother. Loretta was in bed, propped up on pillows so she could breathe better. How was the job thing? Her grandmother asked. It's different than I thought, Alani said, sitting on the edge of the bed. It's in Korea. Korea? That's far away. Yeah, but the money is really good, Nana. Like, really good. Enough to get you into that nice place with the garden. Her grandmother looked at her closely. What kind of job is it? Really? Alani hadn't planned to tell the whole truth. But looking at the woman who'd raised her, she couldn't lie. It's not really a job, she admitted. It's more like a contract. I'd be pretending to be someone's wife. For business reasons. Girl, have you lost your mind? Her grandmother's eyes went wide. That sounds like trouble. I know how it sounds. But the money would fix everything. Your medical bills. The rent. My loans. Her grandmother was quiet for a minute. There's always a catch with easy money. I know, Nana. But I also know you've been carrying too much. She touched Alani's face. Watching you work so hard these past few years, it breaks my heart. What should I do? I can't tell you that. But whatever you decide, you make sure you know what you're getting into. And you promise me you'll come home if things feel wrong. I promise. At 11:47 that night, Alani picked up her phone and the business card. Wyan answered right away. Yes? I have questions, she said. Ask. Is this dangerous? There was a pause. Not directly to you. But my world can be risky. Why me? Really? I told you. I saw something in you. And you need this as much as I do. Alani looked at the clock. 11:51 p.m. If I do this, she said, my grandmother gets taken care of right away. The moment I sign. Before I even leave. Yes. The money goes through within 1 hour of your signature. She took a deep breath. Then I'm saying yes. She heard him exhale softly. A car will pick you up at 9 tomorrow morning, he said. Bring the signed contract. After they hung up, Alani stared at the signature line. Her hands shook as she signed her name. She had no idea what she was really getting into. The next morning, Alani packed a small suitcase. She didn't own much that seemed right for the life of a rich man's wife. She packed her best jeans, her few decent tops, the dress she wore to job interviews. She helped her grandmother get ready too. A nurse from Sunrise Gardens was coming to help with the move. Somehow, the place had found a room right away after getting the payment. I don't like that you're doing this for me, her grandmother said, watching her pack. I'm doing it for both of us, Alani replied, folding a sweater. And it's just for a year. Then I'll come back, finish school, and we'll be free of all this debt. Her grandmother didn't look convinced. Promise me you'll be careful. And call me. And come back if anything feels wrong. I promise. Alani hugged her, breathing in her familiar smell of cocoa butter lotion and cough drops. 2 hours later, the nurse from Sunrise Gardens arrived. The place looked beautiful, clean, bright, with nice staff who smiled without looking rushed. Saying goodbye was harder than Alani expected. She hugged her grandmother one last time outside her new room. I love you, she whispered. I love you more, her grandmother replied. Their usual exchange. Be smart over there, and remember who you are. Back at their apartment, now just her apartment for a few more hours, Alani finished packing. The place felt emptier without her grandmother there, without the oxygen machine's constant noise. As she zipped her suitcase, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car arriving in 10 minutes. Bring ID for marriage license. Marriage license. The words made it suddenly real. She was going to marry a man she'd met twice. A man with a secret problem and business dealings she didn't fully understand. A man who had somehow changed her life with a single contract. Alani took one last look around the apartment, then picked up her suitcase. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back. She closed the door behind her without locking it. The landlord would clean out whatever she left behind once the rent stopped coming. By then, she'd be on the other side of the world, wearing a stranger's ring. The car waiting downstairs was black with dark windows. The driver wore a suit and didn't smile as he took her suitcase and held the door open. Alani slid into the back seat, the leather cool against her legs. As the car pulled away from the curb, she allowed herself one glance back at the building she'd called home. Then she faced forward toward whatever waited across the ocean with Mr. Zhang. The courthouse sat between a coffee shop and a parking garage. Nothing special about it. Just brick and concrete and wide steps leading to glass doors. Alani sat in the back of the car watching people come and go. Regular people doing regular things like fighting traffic tickets or filing paperwork. Not getting fake married to Korean businessmen they barely knew. We're here, the driver said, his first words since picking her up. Mr. Zhang was already waiting inside. He wore a dark gray suit that probably cost more than Alani's old car, his posture perfect as he spoke quietly with another man in a similar suit. When he saw her, he didn't smile exactly, but his expression softened slightly. You came, he said, as if he'd half expected her to change her mind. I signed the contract, she reminded him. He nodded once. This is Miho. He handles legal matters. Miho gave her a slight bow. Ms. Booker, the judge is ready for us. It all felt so normal. No one looked at them strangely. No one questioned why a young black woman from Memphis was marrying a Korean businessman she'd met 2 days ago. Miho had papers ready, answers prepared. Everything moved with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. The courtroom was small with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. A middle-aged judge shuffled papers at her desk, barely glancing up as they entered. Jiang and Booker, she asked. Yes, Your Honor, Miho answered. Two more men in suits, Mr. Jiang's employees apparently, stood as witnesses. No one from Alani's side. No family, no friends. Just strangers in a room watching her sign her name over and over. Do you have rings? The judge asked, sounding bored. Miho handed over a small velvet box. Wait, rings? Alani hadn't thought about rings. Mr. Jiang opened the box. Inside sat two simple gold bands. Nothing flashy, nothing with diamonds, just plain gold circles that would tell the world they belonged to each other. The judge rushed through the ceremony like she was reading a grocery list. Do you, Jiang Weian, take this woman? I do, he said, voice clear and certain. Do you, Alani Booker, take this man? Alani's mouth felt dry. I do. Exchange rings. Mr. Jiang's fingers were cool as they brushed against hers. The ring slid onto her finger, a perfect fit. How did he know her size? She took his ring from the box, noticing a slight tremble in his hand as she slipped it onto his finger. For a flash, she wondered if he'd done this before, hired fake wives when needed. The thought disappeared as the judge spoke again. By the power vested in me by the state of Tennessee, I pronounce you husband and wife. No, you may kiss the bride. Thank goodness. Just like that, Alani was married. Mrs. Jiang. The name felt foreign in her head. They signed the marriage certificate, the witnesses signed, and the judge stamped it with the same enthusiasm she might stamp a parking validation. Congratulations, she said without looking up. Next case. Outside the courtroom, Miho handed Alani a folder containing copies of everything they just signed. Your passport has been expedited, he explained. It will arrive this afternoon with your visa. The flight to Seoul leaves tonight at 11 p.m. Tonight? That was fast. Mr. Jiang checked his watch. We have a suite at the Riverfront Hotel. You can rest there before the flight. His business tone made it clear this was just another transaction for him. Hire wife. Sign papers. Get married. Fly to Korea. Check, check, check. The drive to the hotel was quiet. Alani sat beside Mr. Jiang in the back seat while Miho took the front. Outside, Memphis went about its day, unaware that she had just tied herself to a stranger for the next year. The gold band felt heavy on her finger. She kept touching it, turning it, not used to its weight. Is it uncomfortable? Mr. Jiang asked, noticing her fidgeting. Just new, she replied. You can take it off when we're alone, he said. It's only for appearances. Somehow that made it worse. Even this small symbol was fake. What should I call you? She asked. Now that we're, Mr. Jiang is fine. I can't call my husband Mr., she pointed out. People would notice. He considered this. In public, you may call me Weian. In private, whatever makes you comfortable. And what will you call me? Alani, he said simply. The hotel overlooked the Mississippi River, its glass front reflecting the afternoon sun. Men in suits held doors open as they approached. Not hotel staff, Mr. Jiang's people, Alani realized. They were everywhere, watching, alert. Is all this security normal? She whispered as they entered the elevator. Yes, Mr. Jiang answered. No explanation, just fact. The elevator needed a key card for the top floor. The doors opened directly into a massive suite that made Alani freeze in the entrance. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the river and skyline. The living room alone was bigger than her entire apartment. White couches, glass tables, fresh flowers in tall vases. A dining area with 8 chairs. Multiple doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. Your room is through there, Mr. Jiang said as casually as if they were roommates. Mine is on the left. The staff has placed your things inside. Alani walked slowly to the door he'd indicated. The bedroom was a dream. King-sized bed with more pillows than she could count. Another wall of windows, a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. On the bed lay a small suitcase she didn't recognize. "What's this?" she called out. Mr. Jang appeared in the doorway. "Some suitable clothes for our arrival in Seoul. There will be photographers at the airport." "Photographers?" "I am somewhat known in business circles," he said, understating what she'd gathered from her research. "My marriage will be noteworthy." Alani unzipped the suitcase. Inside were clothes with tags still attached. Designer brands she'd only seen in magazines, a simple black dress, tailored pants, blouses in neutral colors, shoes that looked Italian and expensive. "How did you know my size?" she asked. A flicker of something crossed his face. "The agency took measurements during your interview." That explained the perfect fit of the wedding ring, too. They'd been planning this while she thought she was applying for a housekeeping job. "You can rest," Mr. Jang said. "We leave for the airport at 9 p.m. He closed her door, leaving Alani alone in luxury that felt more like a cage than freedom. The next morning, a black car pulled up outside Alani's apartment building at exactly 9 a.m. The driver, a man in a dark suit who didn't smile, took her suitcase without saying a word. Before heading to the courthouse, they had one important stop to make. Sunrise Gardens looked even prettier than Alani remembered. The building was clean and bright, with big windows that let in lots of sunlight. Flowers bloomed along the walkways. A small pond shimmered in the garden area, with benches placed around it for people to sit and enjoy the view. Inside, the staff greeted them warmly. Somehow, they'd found a room for her grandmother right away after getting the payment. Money really did talk. Alani helped her grandmother unpack her things. Loretta's new room was much nicer than their old apartment. It had a big window overlooking the garden, a comfortable bed, and even a small sitting area with a TV. "This place is too fancy for me," her grandmother said, but Alani could see she was pleased. "You deserve it, Nana," Alani replied, arranging her grandmother's photos on the dresser. She placed the Bible and the quilt her grandfather had given Loretta for their 40th anniversary on the bed. A nurse came in to go over the daily schedule. 3 meals a day in the dining room. Activities in the common areas. Doctors on call 24/7. Medication delivered right to her room. It all sounded perfect. So why did Alani feel like crying? When it was time to leave, Alani hugged her grandmother tightly. "I love you, baby," Loretta said, her voice muffled against Alani's shoulder. "I love you more, Nana," Alani replied. Their usual exchange. "Be smart over there," her grandmother added, pulling back to look her in the eye. "And remember who you are." Alani nodded, not trusting herself to speak. This was the hardest goodbye she'd ever said. As the car pulled away, she watched her grandmother through the window, standing at the entrance of Sunrise Gardens, looking smaller somehow. Alani kept watching until they turned a corner and she couldn't see her anymore. The Memphis courthouse wasn't anything special. Just a big brick building wedged between a coffee shop and a parking garage. People came and went, handling everyday business. Fighting traffic tickets. Filing paperwork. Getting divorced. And, in Alani's case, getting married to a man she barely knew. Mr. Jang, Wyan, was already waiting inside. He wore a dark gray suit that probably cost more than everything Alani owned put together. His face was calm, but she noticed how his eyes kept scanning the room, like he was looking for something. Or someone. "You're here," he said when he saw her, sounding a little surprised. "I signed the contract," she reminded him. He nodded once. "This is Miho. He handles the legal matters." A man in a similar expensive suit gave Alani a small bow. "Ms. Booker, the judge is ready for us." Everything moved quickly after that. Miho had all the paperwork ready. 2 men who worked for Wyan stood as witnesses. No one was there for Alani. No family. No friends. Just strangers watching her sign her name again and again. The courtroom was small, with wooden benches and harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. The judge, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses, barely looked up as they entered. "Jang and Booker?" she asked, sounding bored. "Yes, Your Honor," Miho answered. The ceremony itself took less than 5 minutes. The judge rushed through the words like she was reading a grocery list. "Do you, Jang Wyan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," he said, his voice clear and certain. "Do you, Alani Booker, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Alani's mouth went dry. This was happening. This was really happening. "I do," she said. "Do you have rings?" the judge asked. Rings? Alani hadn't thought about rings. Miho handed over a small velvet box. Wyan opened it to reveal 2 simple gold bands. Nothing fancy or flashy. Just plain gold circles. "Exchange rings," the judge instructed. Wyan's fingers were cool as they brushed against Alani's hand. The ring slid onto her finger perfectly. How did he know her size? She took his ring from the box and noticed a slight shake in his hand as she slipped it onto his finger. For a moment, she wondered if he'd done this before. If there had been other women, other fake wives. "By the power vested in me by the state of Tennessee, I pronounce you husband and wife," the judge said. "No, you may kiss the bride." Thank goodness. They signed the marriage certificate. The witnesses signed. The judge stamped it with the same enthusiasm she might stamp a parking ticket. "Congratulations," she said without looking up. "Next case." Just like that, Alani was married. Mrs. Jang. The name felt strange in her head. Outside the courtroom, Miho handed her a folder containing copies of everything they just signed. "Your passport has been processed quickly," he explained. "It will arrive this afternoon with your visa. The flight to Seoul leaves tonight at 11 p.m. "Tonight?" That was fast. Wyan checked his watch. "We have a suite at the Riverfront Hotel. You can rest there before the flight." The way he said it made it clear this was just business for him. Hire wife. Sign papers. Get married. Fly to Korea. Done. The Riverfront Hotel was the fanciest place Alani had ever been. The car pulled up to the entrance, where men in uniforms rushed to open doors. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. They took an elevator to the top floor. The doors opened directly into the suite. Alani couldn't help but gasp. The place was huge. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Mississippi River and the Memphis skyline. The living room alone was bigger than her entire apartment had been. White couches. Glass tables. Fresh flowers in tall vases. Multiple doors led off to what she guessed were bedrooms. "Your room is through there," Wyan said, pointing to a door on the right. "Mine is on the left. Staff has already put your things inside." Alani walked to her room in a daze. It was beautiful. A king-sized bed with more pillows than she could count. Another wall of windows. A bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. On the bed sat a small suitcase she didn't recognize. "What's this?" she called out. Wyan appeared in the doorway. "Some suitable clothes for our arrival in Seoul. There will be photographers at the airport." "Photographers?" "I am somewhat known in business circles," he said. "My marriage will be noticed." Alani unzipped the suitcase. Inside were clothes with tags still attached. Designer brands she'd only seen in magazines. A simple black dress. Pants and tops in neutral colors. Shoes that looked expensive. "How did you know my size?" she asked. A strange look crossed his face. The agency took measurements during your interview. So they'd been planning this while she thought she was applying for a housekeeping job. They'd been measuring her for a wedding. You can rest, Wyan said. We leave for the airport at 9 p.m. He closed the door, leaving Alani alone in a luxury that somehow felt more like a cage than freedom. She showered using fancy soap that smelled like lemons. The hot water helped clear her head, but questions kept swirling. What would Seoul be like? What would Wyan's home be like? What would she actually be doing all day as a fake wife? When she came out of the bathroom wrapped in a plush robe, her phone had a text from her grandmother, made it to lunch. Room is nice. Nurse Jackie is a character. Call when you can. Attached was a photo of her grandmother sitting by the window in her new room, looking both nervous and pleased. At least that part of the arrangement was working out. Alani called and spoke with her for a few minutes, keeping her voice light, skipping over the details of her quick wedding. She'd tell her grandmother the full truth eventually, but not now. Not over the phone with Wyan potentially listening. I'm flying out tonight, she told her. I'll call when I land. Be safe, baby, her grandmother said. And remember what I said. You come home if anything feels wrong. After the call, Alani tried on one of the new outfits. Black pants and a cream-colored blouse that fit perfectly. The fabric felt rich against her skin. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror, trying to see what others would see. The wife of a wealthy man, elegant, poised. All she saw was Alani Booker playing dress-up. A knock on her door startled her. Yes? Dinner has been delivered, Wyan's voice came through the door. If you'd like to eat. Alani hadn't realized how hungry she was. She opened the door to find Wyan standing there. Jacket off, tie loosened. He looked more human this way, less like a statue. The dining table was set with silver covers over plates and a bottle of what looked like expensive wine. I wasn't sure what you liked, he said. So I ordered several options. Under the covers were steak, fish, pasta, and various side dishes, enough to feed 6 people, not 2. They sat across from each other at the large table. Wyan poured water for them both, ignoring the wine. You don't drink? Alani asked, trying to break the silence. Not often, he replied. Medication? For pain from an old injury. The incident from 3 years ago. His eyes narrowed slightly. You've been researching me. Wouldn't you? She countered. Yes, he set his chopsticks down. That was smart of you. So what happened? The article didn't say much. It was a car accident. Deliberate, his voice was flat, clinical, orchestrated by business rivals. You were hurt badly? Yes. His tone closed the subject. They ate in silence for a while. Alani tried the steak, which was perfectly cooked. The whole situation felt surreal, eating fine dining with her new husband in a luxury hotel, wearing clothes that cost more than her rent. What will I actually be doing in Seoul? She finally asked. Besides being seen with you occasionally? Living your life, he said. You'll have access to the house, staff, cars. You can explore the city, study, whatever you wish. Just be available when needed for public appearances. It sounded both freeing and empty. A year of luxury with no purpose except occasional performances. And your family? Will I meet them? A muscle twitched in his jaw. Some of them. My uncle oversees part of the business. My mother lives outside the city. My father is not in the picture. She wanted to ask more, but his phone rang. He checked the screen, then answered in Korean, his voice instantly changing. Harder, more clipped. Alani couldn't understand the words, but she could read his body language. Whatever the caller was saying, it wasn't good news. Wyan's shoulders tensed. His free hand curled into a fist on the table. His responses became shorter, sharper. When he hung up, he sat perfectly still for a moment, staring at nothing. Is everything okay? Alani asked. He seemed to come back from somewhere far away. There's been a change of plans. That phrase again. It was starting to worry her. What kind of change? Wyan stood and began pacing, something she hadn't seen him do before. His careful control was slipping. My uncle was supposed to meet us next week in Seoul. He says he's decided to come to Memphis instead. He'll be here tomorrow morning. Okay, Alani said slowly. So we'll meet him before we fly out. It's not that simple. Wyan stopped pacing, his face paler than before. He doesn't visit without reason. He's coming to verify. Verify what? Us. This. He gestured between them. My marriage. A cold feeling spread through Alani's stomach. I thought this was just for appearances in Seoul. For business stability or whatever. My uncle has questions. Wyan ran a hand through his hair, messing up its perfect arrangement. He thinks I'm hiding something. Aren't you? His eyes met hers. Yes, but not what he suspects. Alani stood too, suddenly needing to move. What does he suspect? Wyan looked away. Many things. That this marriage isn't real. That I'm not capable of. He trailed off, but Alani could fill in the blank. This had something to do with his condition, the one he wouldn't explain. So what do we do? She asked. We convince him. Wyan's voice hardened again. We must be perfect. Convincing. He will be watching everything. How we speak, how we move around each other, everything. I didn't sign up for this, Alani said. I'm not an actress. No, Wyan agreed. But you are now my wife. At least on paper. He moved to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. And by this time tomorrow, we need to make my uncle believe it's more than paper. Or what happens? He turned back to her, shadows cutting across his face. My uncle arrives tomorrow, he says, face pale. He wants to meet my new bride. And he doesn't believe you exist. You can't leave this bed tonight. Someone is watching. Wyan's words hung in the air between them. Alani's grip tightened on her suitcase handle, her mind racing through every bad movie scenario about forced marriage and trafficking. But the fear in his eyes didn't match those scenarios. He looked, hunted. What do you mean someone's watching? Alani kept her voice low, matching his volume. Who? Wyan moved to the window, carefully, staying to the side of the curtains. My uncle's men, maybe others. I thought your uncle wasn't arriving until tomorrow. His men are always ahead of him. Wyan peered through a small gap in the fabric. This hotel has been secure for years, but after that phone call. He shook his head. He doesn't just want to meet you. He wants to catch us. Catch us doing what? We're not doing anything wrong. We're lying, Wyan gestured between them. This marriage. If he proves it's fake, it creates problems for both of us. Alani set her suitcase down, trying to think clearly. Okay, so he's suspicious. But watching our hotel room? That's crazy. In my world, it's Tuesday. Wyan's attempt at humor fell flat. My uncle doesn't trust easily. When my father died, there were struggles for control. My uncle thinks I'm not strong enough to lead the family business. And a wife proves you're strong? A wife proves stability. Continuation of the family line. His voice tightened on the last part. So what exactly are you saying we need to do tonight? Alani crossed her arms defensively. Share the bed. Sleep. Nothing more. He looked almost embarrassed. But if anyone is watching through cameras, or if someone reports back to my uncle, they need to see a normal married couple. Alani glanced at the king-sized bed dominating the room. It was huge. Plenty of space for 2 people to sleep without touching. Can't we just... I don't know, mess up both sides of the bed, and I'll sleep on the couch. The suite may be bugged too, he said quietly. Sound, not just video. Alani rubbed her forehead, feeling a headache coming on. This is way more than I signed up for. I know. For the first time, Wyan's businessman facade cracked slightly. He looked tired. And I'm sorry. But tonight is important. If we convince them now, it buys us time. Alani considered her options. She could refuse, break the contract, go home, back to unpaid bills, her grandmother's move interrupted, debt collectors calling. Or she could spend one awkward night sharing a bed with a stranger and wake up with the contract and the money still intact. Fine, she said finally. But we're setting some ground rules. Relief softened his features. Of course. I sleep in my clothes. You sleep in yours. We stay on opposite sides. And this is a one-time thing. Agreed. He nodded formally as if they'd just negotiated a business deal. And maybe they had. Alani grabbed her small overnight bag. I'm going to change in the bathroom. The bathroom was bigger than her old bedroom, all marble and glass. Alani splashed water on her face, staring at her reflection. How had her life turned so completely upside down in just 3 days? She changed into the closest thing to pajamas she had, yoga pants and a loose t-shirt, and brushed her teeth, taking her time. When she finally emerged, Wyan had dimmed the lights and was sitting on one side of the bed, still fully dressed except for his shoes and jacket. I'll take this side, he said, indicating the half nearest the window. Fine. Alani approached cautiously, setting her phone on the nightstand. They moved awkwardly around each other like dancers who'd never practiced together. She pulled back the covers on her side while he arranged pillows between them, a soft barrier marking their territories. Ready? He asked, hand on the lamp switch. Alani nodded, sliding under the covers. The sheets were cool and expensive, nothing like her worn cotton ones at home. The mattress dipped slightly as Wyan got in on his side, keeping the pillow wall intact between them. The light clicked off, plunging the room into darkness broken only by the faint glow of the city through the curtains. Good night, he said formally. Night, she replied, turning on her side to face away from him. Alani lay awake, hyper-aware of the stranger breathing a few feet away. The whole situation felt surreal. Married this morning, sharing a bed tonight, flying to Korea tomorrow. Her life had become a bizarre movie, and she wasn't sure if it was a thriller or a tragedy. Wyan's breathing never deepened into sleep. She could tell he was awake too. Both of them pretending to rest while their minds raced. The minutes crawled by, marked by the digital clock on the nightstand. 11:42, 12:15. 12:53. Somewhere after 1 a.m., exhaustion finally pulled Alani under. She woke to movement. The bed was shaking slightly. At first, still half asleep, she thought it might be an earthquake. Then she heard the sound, a small choked noise that wasn't quite a word. Alani turned over. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, she could make out Wyan's form. He was still asleep, but his body was rigid, his hands clenched in the sheets. Sweat gleamed on his forehead. His head moved side to side in tiny jerky motions like he was trying to say no without speaking. Another sound escaped him, part whimper, part gasp. Mr. Jang, Alani whispered. He didn't wake. His breathing grew faster, more ragged. Words tumbled from his lips. Korean phrases she couldn't understand, but their desperate tone needed no translation. He was trapped in something terrible. Mr. Jang, she said again, louder. Wake up. His body jerked violently, nearly knocking over the pillow barrier. His hands clawed at his chest as if fighting invisible restraints. Alani reached out, then hesitated. Should she touch him? Would it make things worse? Before she could decide, Wyan's eyes flew open. For a moment, they were wild, unseeing. Then awareness flooded back along with something that looked like shame. He sat up quickly, breathing hard. "I apologize," he said, voice rough. "I didn't mean to wake you." "It's okay," Alani said. "Are you all right?" "Yes." The word was automatic, unconvincing. Alani watched as he swung his legs over the side of the bed, sitting with his back to her. His shoulders rose and fell with each deliberate breath. He was trying to regain control. "Does that happen a lot?" she asked. A long pause. "Since the accident. Do you want to talk about it?" Alani surprised herself by asking. This wasn't her problem. They weren't really married. His nightmares weren't her concern. "No," he said, then softer, "but thank you." The clock on the nightstand showed 3:14 a.m. Wyan stayed by the window, apparently not ready to return to sleep and its waiting nightmares. Alani sat up, leaning against the headboard. "My grandmother has nightmares sometimes," she said, not sure why she was sharing this. "About when my grandfather died. She says talking about it helps." "Perhaps your grandmother is wiser than I am," Wyan replied quietly. Silence settled between them. Alani thought he'd closed the conversation, but then he spoke again, his voice so low she had to strain to hear. "It wasn't just a car accident," he said. "It was 3 days." 3 days? "They held me for 3 days before staging the accident." His fingers made air quotes around the word. The crash was to cover what happened before. Alani's stomach tightened. "They kidnapped you." A business disagreement, his tone was flat, as if discussing weather. "My father had recently died. Leadership was contested." "Your uncle?" Wyan's shoulders stiffened. "Not directly. A rival family. But my uncle didn't stop it. Didn't pay what they asked." 3 days became very long. Alani couldn't imagine what very long meant in this context. "Didn't want to." "I'm sorry," she said. The words felt inadequate. Wyan turned from the window, his face in shadow. "The doctor said some damage was permanent. Physical. Neurological." He paused. "When I returned, rumors started. Questions about whether I could still lead, whether I could continue the family line. And there it was, the unspoken thing at the center of their arrangement. That's why you need a wife," Alani said slowly. "To stop the rumors." "A wife buys time," he agreed. "Expectations for children won't come immediately. And after a year, when our contract ends, a tragic divorce. Or an accident." His voice was cool, practical. Alani hugged her knees to her chest, processing. This man had been kidnapped, tortured, and left with permanent damage. Now he was fighting to hold on to control of a family business that operated partly outside the law. And she was caught in the middle. "You should have told me this before I signed," she said. "Would you have signed if I had?" The honest answer was no. And they both knew it. "Get some sleep," Wyan said, moving away from the window. "Tomorrow will be difficult with my uncle." "What about you?" "I rarely sleep after." He gestured vaguely to the bed, to the nightmare still lingering there. "Try," Alani said. "I'm a light sleeper. If it happens again, I'll wake you." Something flickered across his face. Surprise. Maybe gratitude. He nodded once and returned to his side of the bed, carefully rebuilding the pillow barrier that had been disturbed. They lay back down, further apart than before, both staring at the ceiling. "Thank you," Wyan said after a while, so quietly she almost missed it. Alani didn't answer, pretending to be already asleep. She wasn't ready to acknowledge the strange intimacy of what had just happened. Not the physical closeness, but the revelation. She'd glimpsed the broken pieces beneath Wyan's perfect surface. She lay awake long after his breathing finally deepened into sleep, turning over everything she'd learned. His enemies hadn't just tried to kill him. They'd taken something from him, something central to how men in his world measured power. And now they were watching, waiting for any sign of weakness to finish what they'd started. Which meant Alani wasn't just a fake wife. She was a shield. A human smokescreen. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it awakened something unexpected, a protective instinct, a flash of anger at people who would use such a private injury as a weapon. Dawn was breaking by the time her eyes grew heavy again. Golden light began seeping around the edges of the curtains. In the half-light, Wyan's sleeping face looked younger. The careful mask set aside. Just before Alani drifted off, a bright flash illuminated their window from outside. Quick, artificial, gone in an instant. A phone camera. They were being watched, just as Wyan had said. The game had already begun. Alani woke up to the sound of running water. Sunlight was coming through a crack in the curtains, making a bright line across the empty side of the bed where Wyan had been. The bathroom door opened and Wyan walked out, already dressed in a fresh suit, his hair still damp. He stopped when he saw she was awake. "Good morning," he said stiffly. "My uncle will be here in 90 minutes. There's a dress in your closet for breakfast." Alani sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. What about the camera flash last night? A muscle tightened in his jaw. One of my uncle's men. I've checked the hotel security footage. So they really are watching us. Yes. He fixed his already perfect tie. And they'll be watching today too. Every word. Every move. Great. Nothing like pressure first thing in the morning. She got out of bed and found a navy blue dress hanging in her closet. It was simple but nice, with sleeves that came to her elbows. Next to it hung a small pearl necklace. The outfit screamed, respectable new wife. As she showered and dressed, Alani tried to prepare mentally. She needed to seem like a woman in love, not a woman in a business deal. She needed to know the kind of things about Wyan that a real wife would know. "We need a crash course in each other," she announced, walking out of the bedroom. Basic stuff that real couples would know. Wyan looked up from his phone. "Like what?" "How we met. Your favorite food. Whether you snore." She sat across from him at the small table where coffee was waiting. "Your uncle's going to ask." He nodded slowly. "You're right. Let's keep it simple. We met at your blues club 3 months ago while I was in Memphis on business. 3 months is pretty fast to get married. Rich men make quick decisions about beautiful women," he said matter-of-factly. "It's believable." Alani felt her cheeks get warm at the casual way he called her beautiful. "Okay. What else?" "I don't snore. I like Korean food but also American steaks. I read history books for fun. I work too much." He listed facts about himself like items on a menu. "Your turn." "I worked at the blues club to help pay for school. I was studying business before I had to drop out to take care of my grandmother. I like early mornings and thunderstorms. I make really good pancakes." Wyan nodded, like he was memorizing everything. "What about pet names?" she asked. A husband and wife would have names for each other. Wyan hadn't thought of that. "I guess I could call you, darling. And I could call you honey sometimes. Nothing too mushy." That would work. He seemed uncomfortable with even this small bit of fake intimacy. Wyan handed her a phone. "This is secure. Untraceable. Use it only for emergencies." A knock at the door ended their practice time. Wyan's face instantly changed, becoming more guarded. "Ready?" he asked. No. She wasn't. But she nodded anyway. The man who walked into their suite moved like a tiger, smooth, patient, dangerous. He was in his early 60s with silver-streaked hair, perfectly styled. His clothes were expensive but not flashy, the kind of rich that didn't need to show off. His eyes missed nothing, taking in every detail of the room before settling on Alani. Two men in dark suits came in behind him, positioning themselves near the exits. Bodyguards, clearly. Wyan stepped forward. "Uncle, this is my wife, Alani." "Alani, my uncle, Kim Sango." The older man smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "So you really do exist. My nephew has been quite mysterious about you." "It's nice to meet you, sir," Alani said, offering her hand. Instead of shaking it, he clasped it between both of his, a gesture that seemed friendly but felt like being trapped. "Please, call me Uncle Sango. We are family now." His English was perfect with barely any accent. That somehow made him more scary. "Shall we have breakfast?" Wyan suggested, his voice slightly tense. Hotel staff wheeled in a cart loaded with covered dishes. The smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the suite as they sat around the dining table. Uncle Sango's men stood near the door, watching silently. "So, Alani," the uncle began as servers poured coffee. "Tell me how you met my nephew." He's been unusually quiet about the details. Alani felt Wyan tense beside her. This was their first test. "I was working at the Blue Note on Beale Street," she said, smiling like it was a happy memory. "He came in with some business people. Most customers barely noticed the staff, but Wyan actually looked at me when he ordered. Asked how long I'd worked there." Uncle Sango raised an eyebrow. "And that impressed you?" "Being seen impresses everyone," Alani replied honestly. "We talked a little that night. He came back the next evening alone." This was all made up, but it felt real as she said it. Wyan was looking at her with something like surprise. "And now, 3 months later, you're married," the uncle observed. "Rather quick, don't you think?" Alani took a sip of coffee. "When you know, you know." The uncle's laugh was sharp, like breaking glass. How practical Americans are about love. He turned to Wyan. "Your father took 3 years to decide on your mother." "Times change, uncle," Wyan replied. "Indeed they do." Sango cut into his eggs with surgical precision. "And what do you know about our family business, Alani?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "I know it's complicated," she said carefully. "Multiple companies, some public, some private." "And the private ones don't concern you?" "They concern me because they concern my husband," Alani said, meeting his gaze. "But I trust his judgment." Uncle Sango studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. "Trust? Such a rare thing." He set the cup down with a soft clink. "And children? Will those come quickly too?" Wyan's hand tightened on his fork. "We're enjoying being newlyweds first," Alani said smoothly. "Some things shouldn't be rushed." The uncle smiled thinly. "Wise. Though at your husband's age, heir considerations become pressing. His position demands continuity." The threat was barely hidden: no heir, no leadership. "We understand family obligations," Alani said, placing her hand over Wyan's in a gesture that felt both strange and necessary. Breakfast continued with the uncle asking questions that seemed casual but were actually carefully designed traps. Where would they live in Seoul? Had Alani met any other family members? Was she planning to learn Korean? Through it all, Wyan remained tense beside her, answering when needed but letting Alani take the lead. After breakfast, Uncle Sango made an unexpected suggestion. "I'd like to see this famous Beale Street before I return to Seoul," he announced. "Perhaps you could show me where you met." Alani's stomach dropped. The Blue Note, where everyone knew her as a server, not as the wife of a wealthy businessman. Wyan started to object. "Uncle, we have flight preparations." "Nonsense. A quick visit." "I insist." The words were pleasant. The tone was not. 30 minutes later, their small group of black SUVs pulled up at the edge of Beale Street. Even in daylight, the area had character. Neon signs unlit but still colorful. Music spilling from open doors. Tourists mixing with locals. Alani felt dizzy walking into the Blue Note as a customer. Wyan's hand at the small of her back. Uncle Sango following with his men. The lunch crowd was thin, but several staff members were setting up, including Marcus, her former manager. His eyes widened when he saw her. Alani. Didn't expect to see you back so soon. Before she could respond, Uncle Sango stepped forward. You know my nephew's wife? Marcus looked between them, confusion clear on his face. Wife? Alani, you got married? The moment felt like walking on thin ice. Wyan's hand pressed slightly harder against her back. It was sudden, Alani said, smiling. Remember that night I served Mr. Jiang and his colleagues? Well. She leaned into Wyan slightly, playing the smitten newlywed. Sometimes life surprises you. Marcus still looked bewildered but nodded. Congratulations. Can I get you folks a table? They were seated at the same corner table where Alani had first served Wyan and his associates. The irony wasn't lost on her. Uncle Sango ordered whiskey despite the early hour. Wyan asked for water. Alani could feel her former co-workers glancing their way, whispering. So this is where it began, Uncle Sango said, looking around dismissively. Quite atmospheric. The music is better at night, Alani said. I'm sure. The uncle swirled his whiskey. Tell me, Alani, what was it about my nephew that captured your heart? Besides the obvious financial advantages. Wyan stiffened beside her. Uncle. No, I want to hear from your wife. Uncle Sango's smile was sharp. What did you love first about Wyan? It was a trap. Say something too personal and it would sound fake. Say something too obvious and it would sound mercenary. Alani thought about the man beside her. The careful way he hung up his jacket. The nightmares that shook his body. The vulnerability he'd shown at 3 a.m. His control, she said finally. The way he holds himself like he's carrying something heavy but never complains. She looked directly at Wyan, not the uncle. The way he seems cold until you realize he's just careful with himself. With others. Wyan's eyes widened slightly. For a moment, the mask slipped, showing genuine surprise. Uncle Sango's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Interesting observation for a new wife. I pay attention, Alani replied. And what else have you noticed about my nephew? Another test. Alani thought about what a real wife would know. He takes his coffee black but adds sugar when he thinks no one's looking, she improvised. He sleeps on his right side. He checks his watch when he's uncomfortable. Not because he cares about the time. Wyan was looking at her strangely now. The details were made up, but somehow accurate. Uncle Sango leaned back, studying them both. And have you learned about his medical concerns? The air seemed to vanish from the room. Wyan went completely still. I know everything I need to know, Alani said, her voice steady despite the anger blooming inside her at the casual cruelty of the question. Everything? Uncle Sango pressed. Everything that matters between a husband and wife, Alani replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. A heavy silence fell over the table. Your loyalty is admirable, the uncle finally said. Whether it's earned or purchased. Wyan's hand found hers under the table, squeezing once in silent thanks. The rest of the visit passed in a blur. More questions. Veiled comments. Uncle Sango studying every interaction between them like a scientist watching lab rats. When they finally returned to the hotel, the uncle prepared to leave for the airport. I'll see you both in Seoul, he said, shaking Wyan's hand firmly. Family dinner next week. He turned to Alani, taking her hand in both of his again. Welcome to our family, my dear. I hope you understand what you've married into. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Remember, in our world, appearances can be. He paused. Deceiving. The threat was clear. I'm not convinced. After the uncle and his men departed, silence filled the suite. Wyan walked straight to the bar and poured himself a drink, something he'd said he rarely did. His hand shook visibly as he lifted the glass. Alani sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. That was intense. You did well, Wyan said without looking at her. Better than I expected. Thanks, I think. She kicked off her heels, wiggling her toes in relief. Is he always like that, your uncle? Wyan took a long swallow of his drink. Yes. He tests everyone. Always looking for weakness. Well, I think we passed. Wyan set his glass down with a sharp clink. No. He finally turned to face her, his expression grim. You did well, but it doesn't matter. He already knows. What do you mean he already knows? Alani stood up, no longer tired. Knows what exactly? Wyan poured himself another drink, this one bigger than the first. That this marriage isn't real. How could he know? We were convincing. My uncle doesn't need proof. He works on instinct. Wyan drained half his glass in one swallow. And he's rarely wrong. Alani watched him, the careful businessman now showing cracks. His tie was loosened, hair slightly messed from running his hand through it, eyes darting to his phone every few seconds. So what does this mean for us? For the contract? It means things just got more complicated. He finished his drink, set the glass down with too much force. We need to leave now. Our flight's been moved up. Wait. Alani moved to block his path as he headed toward the bedroom. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's really going on. All of it. He tried to step around her. We don't have time. Make time. She crossed her arms. Your uncle just threatened me, and you're saying he knows our secret. I deserve the truth before I get on a plane with you. They stared at each other. A silent battle of wills. Finally, Wyan's shoulders dropped slightly. Fine. He moved to the window, keeping his back to her. What do you want to know? Everything. Starting with what your business really is. He was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. The Han Group began with my grandfather. After the Korean War, he started with protection fees from local merchants. Small at first, then bigger. By the time my father took over, we had shipping routes throughout Asia. Shipping what? Initially whatever paid. Later, whatever was exclusive. Art. Technology. A hesitation. Sometimes people. Alani felt cold. Human trafficking? Not anymore, he said quickly. My father stopped that part 20 years ago. Too risky. Too cruel. We shifted to real estate. Nightclubs. Lending. Loan sharks. High-interest private loans, he corrected, for people banks won't touch. And what happens when they can't pay? Wyan finally turned to face her. Sometimes we take property instead. Sometimes we find them employment to work off the debt. Forced labor. Paid work, he insisted. Hard, yes. Illegal sometimes. But no one disappears anymore. That was my father's change. And your uncle doesn't like these changes. A humorless smile touched his lips. My uncle thinks mercy is weakness. When my father died, he expected to take control. But my father's will was clear. The business passed to me. So your uncle's been fighting you ever since. Not openly. That would create division, make us vulnerable to rivals. Instead, he undermines. Questions my decisions. Looks for weakness. Like your. Alani hesitated. Medical condition. Pain flickered across his face. Yes. After the kidnapping, when it became clear that I couldn't, he stopped, recalibrated. In our world, a man who cannot have children is considered incomplete. Temporary. That's archaic. It's reality, he said simply. My uncle has a son. If I show weakness, if I cannot secure the future of the family, control shifts to them. And people would die during that shift. Yes. My loyal people. Anyone who supported me. He ran a hand through his hair again. And possibly you, now that you're connected to me. The reality of her situation suddenly felt very heavy. This wasn't just about pretending to be married. This was about survival in a world where appearances determined who lived and died. Alani looked down at the gold band on her finger. It felt heavier now. Not just a prop for a performance, but a target painted on her back. Pack your things, Wyan said, his voice softer now. The plane will be ready in 2 hours. As he left the room, Alani stood frozen, the full weight of her decision finally hitting her. She hadn't just signed up for a fake marriage. She'd signed up for a war. And what she couldn't know, was that the uncle had already made his first move against her. Before his plane had even taken off, he'd sent a team to Memphis. Not to follow her. To watch her grandmother. Alani had never seen a private jet up close before. It sat on the tarmac, gleaming white with the Han Group logo on the tail. It looked like something from a movie, not something she was about to step into. Security people were everywhere. Men in dark suits scanning the area, checking under the plane, talking into earpieces. The driver opened her door and a man in a pilot's uniform greeted them at the stairs. Good evening, Mr. Zhang. We're ready for takeoff whenever you are. Wyan just nodded, his mind clearly elsewhere. He'd been quiet since they left the hotel, checking his phone constantly. Inside, the plane was even more impressive. Leather seats that looked more comfortable than any bed Alani had ever slept in. Wood panels on the walls. Fresh flowers in crystal vases. There was even a separate bedroom area in the back. Your company owns this? She asked as she sank into a seat by the window. Several, Wyan replied absently, still looking at his phone. A flight attendant offered them drinks. Alani asked for water. Wyan didn't respond at all, so the attendant just left a bottle for him. They took off into the night sky. Memphis's lights spread out below them like scattered jewels, then faded as they climbed higher. Alani watched until there was nothing to see but darkness. 14 hours to Seoul. 14 hours trapped in a metal tube with a man she'd married yesterday but barely knew. A man whose uncle wanted to destroy him. A man with secrets that kept piling up. She tried to sleep, but couldn't. Her mind kept replaying the uncle's visit. The thinly veiled threats. The way he'd looked at her, like he was trying to find the weak point in her armor. 3 hours into the flight, Alani noticed something was wrong with Wyan. His breathing had changed. It was too fast, too shallow. His knuckles were white where he gripped the armrest. His face had gone pale. She recognized the signs. Her cousin had come back from Afghanistan with panic attacks that looked just like this. Without saying anything, she moved to the seat beside him. He didn't seem to notice her. His eyes were fixed on something only he could see. Wyan, she said softly. You're having a panic attack. He didn't respond. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. It feels like you're dying, but you're not, she continued, keeping her voice calm. Focus on me. Breathe with me. She took his hand, not caring about crossing boundaries anymore. His skin was cold and clammy. Breathe in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. She demonstrated. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. At first, he couldn't follow. His breath came in gasps. But she kept going, kept counting, kept her hand firmly on his. Slowly, his breathing began to match hers. The death grip on the armrest loosened slightly. The plane, he managed between breaths. Reminds me of when they took me. We're safe here, she assured him. Your people checked everything. Focus on now, not then. They sat like that for several minutes, breathing together, her hands steady on his. Gradually, color returned to his face. The shaking subsided. Better? She asked. He nodded but didn't pull his hand away. Thank you. His voice was rough, like the words had been dragged up from somewhere deep. Does that happen often? Sometimes. When I'm... He hesitated, when control slips. You can't control everything, she said gently. I have to try. Too many people depend on me. Looking at him now, vulnerable and human, it was hard to see the powerful crime boss. She just saw a man carrying too much weight, afraid to put it down. Why did you really bring me into all this? She asked. The truth? Please. He was quiet for a long moment. Because I'm tired, he finally admitted, of pretending to be unbreakable. With you, there's no history, no expectations. You already know my weakness, so I don't have to hide it. The honesty surprised her. But you've been watching me for months. Since that rainy day. Not watching, he clarified. But yes, I noticed you. Kept track. That's a little creepy. A small unexpected smile touched his lips. Perhaps. Why didn't you just ask me out like a normal person instead of this whole fake marriage scheme? Would you have said yes? A waitress with a Korean businessman who barely speaks. She had to admit he had a point. Probably not. And I needed more than dating, he added, serious again. I needed someone who would understand why this arrangement was necessary. Someone with their own reasons to agree. My grandmother's medical bills. Yes. They fell silent. Alani looked out the window at the endless dark sky. There was something strangely intimate about sitting here in the dim light of the plane, having this conversation. Like they were the only two people in the world. Tell me about your family, she said. The real story. He sighed, but began talking. For the first time, he told her everything. How his grandfather had started the business after the Korean War, collecting protection money from local shops. How his father had expanded it into shipping, real estate, nightclubs. How, when his father died, the will had shocked everyone by leaving everything to Wyan instead of his uncle. My uncle believed he should take over. He'd been preparing for years. But my father... A hint of pride crept into Wyan's voice. My father saw something in me. Something worth believing in. And the kidnapping? His expression darkened. 3 years ago. A rival family, but with my uncle's knowledge. They took me from my car, held me for 3 days. My uncle refused to pay what they asked. He wanted you to suffer. He wanted to prove I was weak. That I would break. Wyan's free hand moved unconsciously to his throat, as if feeling phantom fingers there. When they realized I wouldn't, they staged a car accident to cover what they'd done. And the damage was permanent? He nodded, looking away. Some physical. Some other kinds. The doctor said certain things couldn't be fixed. When I returned, rumors started. Questions about whether I could still lead. Whether I could. He paused, continued the family line. And there it was. The reason for their arrangement. The thing at the center of all this. That's why you need a wife, Alani said slowly. To stop the rumors. A wife buys time, he agreed. Expectations for children won't come immediately. And after a year, when our contract ends, a tragic divorce. Or an accident. His voice was cool, practical. Either way, I will have secured my position by then through other means. Alani pulled her hand back, processing everything. This man had been kidnapped, tortured, and left with damage that apparently made him unable to have children. Now he was fighting to hold on to control of a family crime business. And she was caught in the middle. You should have told me this before I signed, she said. Would you have signed if I had? The honest answer was no. And they both knew it. We're halfway through this story, and things are about to get a lot more intense. If you're still with me, you know this isn't just a simple love story. It's about survival, trust, and two broken people finding something real in the middle of chaos. If you've made it this far and you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. Smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. Now, let's see what waits for them in Seoul. Seoul greeted them with rain. It poured from a dark sky, making the city lights blur and shimmer. From the window of yet another black car, Alani tried to take it all in. Towering glass buildings. Neon signs in a language she couldn't read. Streets crowded with people despite the weather. It was beautiful. It was overwhelming. It was completely foreign. Security was everywhere. 3 cars in their convoy, one ahead, one behind. Men with earpieces talking in Korean. One of them, a serious-faced man named Ji-hoon, seemed to be in charge. Is all this normal? Alani asked, gesturing at their convoy. When my uncle is involved, yes, Wyan replied, his businessman mask firmly back in place. The vulnerable man from the plane was gone, locked away again. They drove through the rainy city for about 30 minutes, finally pulling into an underground garage beneath a sleek high-rise. More security waited there. They took a private elevator straight to the top floor. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that made Alani freeze in the entrance. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city spread out below, rain running down the glass like tears. The living room alone was bigger than her entire apartment back in Memphis. White furniture. Glass tables. Modern art on the walls. Everything perfect, pristine. And completely impersonal. There were no photos, no books left open, no sign that anyone actually lived here. Your room is through there, Wyan said, pointing to a hallway. Mine is on the left. The staff has placed your things inside. Alani followed his directions and found a beautiful bedroom with its own sitting area and bathroom. More windows. More perfect, untouched space. A woman about 50 years old appeared in the doorway and bowed. I am Mrs. Park, she said in heavily accented English. Housekeeper. Need anything, tell me. Thank you, Alani said, wondering how many people worked in this place. When she came back to the living room, Wyan was checking his watch. I have meetings, he said. I'll be back late. Mrs. Park will bring you dinner. Rest. The jet lag will hit soon. And just like that, he was gone, leaving Alani alone in a massive apartment in a foreign country, married to a man she'd known for 3 days. She spent the afternoon exploring the penthouse. The kitchen was state-of-the-art but looked unused, like a showroom. The dining room had a table that could seat 12. There was a home theater, a gym, even a small indoor garden. But nowhere did she find anything personal. No photos of family. No books that showed what Wyan liked to read. No music. Nothing that gave any hint about who lived here. It wasn't a home. It was a beautiful, empty shell. Mrs. Park brought dinner, a selection of Korean dishes Alani didn't recognize but enjoyed trying. She ate alone at the huge table, feeling small and out of place. As evening turned to night, Alani stood at the windows, watching the city lights. Seoul was stunning from up here, a sea of light stretching to the horizon. But she felt completely disconnected from it. Like she was watching a movie of a place, not actually there. Her phone didn't work here. The Wi-Fi password was written on a card in her room, but she hadn't brought her laptop. She felt completely cut off from everything familiar. She was dozing on the couch when her new secure phone buzzed. A text from Wyan. Meeting finished early. Coming back now. We need to talk. Those last 4 words, we need to talk, had never preceded good news in the history of relationships. 20 minutes later, the elevator doors opened and Wyan stepped into the penthouse. He looked tired, his tie loosened, hair slightly messed like he'd been running his hand through it. But what caught her attention was his expression. He looked afraid. What's wrong? She asked, standing up. He moved quickly through the apartment, checking behind paintings, under tables, along window frames. What are you doing? Checking for bugs, he said tersely. Listening devices. Why would there be? Found one. He held up a tiny black disc no bigger than a button. Then another from behind a lamp. A third from under the dining table. Someone's been listening to us? Yes. His face was grim. The penthouse isn't secure. We need to leave. Now. Pack only what you need. But we just got here. Now, Alani. His voice left no room for argument. We have 5 minutes. She hurried to her room and threw some clothes into a bag. When she came back, the security team had grown to 6 men, all moving with controlled urgency. Alani took it hesitantly. And I'm just supposed to trust that? Yes. The word was simple. Final. Because despite what you think, I am trying to protect you both. He walked away, disappearing into his room and closing the door firmly behind him. Alani stared at the phone in her hand. Tears of frustration burned behind her eyes. She'd known this arrangement was complicated, but she hadn't understood just how dangerous Wyan's world really was. And now her grandmother was caught in it too. Life in the safe house fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Well, normal if you ignored the armed guards outside and the fact that Alani was pretending to be married to a Korean mafia boss. The place was smaller than the penthouse but felt more like a real home. 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room, and a kitchen where they actually ate meals together. No floor-to-ceiling windows meant fewer places for someone to watch them. Safer. On their second morning there, Wyan introduced Alani to Ji-hoon, his head of security. He will teach you to protect yourself, Wyan said. Ji-hoon was serious and didn't smile much, but he was a good teacher. Every morning, they cleared the furniture in the living room, and he showed her how to break someone's grip, where to hit to cause the most pain, and how to create distance so she could run. Like this, he said, grabbing her wrist. Alani twisted her arm the way he'd shown her, breaking his hold and stepping back quickly. Good, Ji-hoon nodded. Again. By the end of the week, she could flip a man twice her size. Her years of dance classes had given her good balance and body awareness. You learn fast, Ji-hoon said, which from him was high praise. During the days, Wyan went to meetings. Business stuff, he said. Alani didn't ask for details. She spent her time training with Ji-hoon, exploring the neighborhood with a security escort, or reading books from the safe house's small collection. At night, they ate dinner together. Awkward at first, but slowly they started talking. Really talking. Not about the contract or his uncle or the danger, but about themselves. Why did you drop out of school? He asked one night over Korean food she was learning to love. My grandmother got sick. Someone needed to take care of her, and we couldn't afford help. You gave up your future for her. She gave up everything for me when my parents died. It was my turn. Wyan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Family is everything. What about your family? You never talk about your mother. Something soft crossed his face. She lives outside Seoul. My father kept her away from the business. For safety. Do you see her? When I can. Not often enough. Every night, they slept in the same bed. It had started as necessity at the hotel but continued at the safe house. Neither mentioned it. Alani told herself it was just in case someone was watching. But she knew there was more to it. When Wyan had nightmares, she woke him gently. When she couldn't sleep, worrying about her grandmother, he stayed awake with her. They never touched, always keeping to opposite sides, but something was growing between them. Something neither one was ready to name. After a week of hiding, Wyan came home with a determined look on his face. We need to stop hiding, he said as they ate dinner. My uncle is spreading rumors. People are questioning my control of the business. We need to be seen. In public. Together. Isn't that dangerous? Hiding is more dangerous right now. We need to show strength. Alani put down her chopsticks. What did you have in mind? A charity gala tomorrow night. For children's hospitals. Everyone who matters in Seoul will be there. He paused. Including my uncle. You want to walk right into your uncle's territory? Wyan's eyes had that intense look she was learning meant his mind was made up. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. And that's how, the next evening, Alani found herself being transformed by a stylist Wyan had brought to the safe house. The woman worked quietly, turning Alani's hair into an elegant updo with pearl pins. Her makeup was subtle but made her eyes look huge, her lips fuller. The dress waiting for her was midnight blue, floor-length, with a modest neckline but a back that dipped just low enough to be elegant without being revealing. It fit like it had been made for her. It probably had been. One final touch, the stylist said, opening a velvet box. Inside were diamond earrings and a matching necklace. Real diamonds. More money than Alani had ever seen, just sitting there to be worn for one night. When she was fully dressed and stepped out of the bedroom, Wyan was waiting in the hallway. He stopped mid-sentence in his conversation with Ji-hoon. For a moment, he just stared. You look. He seemed to search for the right word. Beautiful. Alani felt her cheeks warm. Will I pass as your wife? You will outshine everyone there. He looked pretty good himself in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, until Ji-hoon cleared his throat. The car is waiting, sir. The ballroom of the Grand Seoul Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and wealth. Women in designer gowns that cost more than cars. Men in tuxedos who ran companies and, in some cases, parts of the underworld too. Ready? Wyan asked as they stepped into the room. Alani took a deep breath. Ready. His hands settled at the small of her back, warm and steady, guiding her through the crowd. They'd practiced this, the little touches that made them look like a real couple. His hand at her back. Her fingers straightening his tie. The way she leaned slightly toward him when he spoke. People watched them. Everyone watched them. Alani could feel eyes following their every move. Wyan introduced her to a blur of important people. Business partners. Politicians. Family allies. She smiled and said all the right things, playing the role of adoring new bride. And across the room, watching their every move, stood Uncle Sango. He's here, Alani whispered. I know, Wyan replied, his voice calm but his body tense. That's why we're going to dance. Dance? Trust me. The orchestra was playing something slow and elegant. Wyan led Alani onto the floor, taking one of her hands in his, placing his other hand properly at her waist. Then he began to move. He was a good dancer. Really good. He led with confidence, guiding her through steps she somehow managed to follow despite never having learned them. You never mentioned you could dance, she said, genuinely surprised. There are many things you don't know about me. His eyes had that almost smile she was starting to recognize. Like what? I make decent pancakes. Alani laughed, the sound so genuine it surprised her. The big bad businessman cooks breakfast? My mother taught me, he said, and something warm flickered in his eyes at the memory. Sunday mornings were for pancakes. Another piece of the puzzle that was Wyan. Another glimpse of the real man behind the mask. The dance ended too soon. Wyan was pulled away by a business associate who wanted to introduce him to someone important. Alani drifted toward the refreshment table, still smiling from their dance. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne flutes. Something about him felt off. His eyes weren't on her but were scanning the room. His hand dipped briefly into his jacket pocket. Ji-Hune's training kicked in. Alani didn't think. She just acted. She knocked the tray from the man's hands. Glass shattered across the marble floor, champagne spraying everywhere. People nearby gasped and stepped back. He has something, she shouted. The fake waiter's eyes went wide. His hand emerged from his pocket. Not a gun. A syringe. Security guards converged from all directions. Wyan pushed through the crowd, running toward her. The attacker saw him coming and changed direction, heading straight for Wyan. Everything happened so fast after that. The security team was closing in. The attacker lunged. Wyan put himself between Alani and the threat. The syringe plunged into Wyan's shoulder. The attacker was tackled to the ground, but it was too late. The damage was done. Wyan staggered. His face went pale. Whatever had been in that needle was working fast. He hit the floor before Alani could catch him. Wyan. She knelt beside him, cradling his head. His eyes were unfocused. His breathing was becoming labored. Ji-Hune appeared beside her. Hospital. Now. The private hospital looked more like a luxury hotel. Wyan had his own room with equipment that looked state-of-the-art. The doctors spoke English for Alani's benefit, explaining that the substance was a powerful muscle relaxant combined with a sedative. Not deadly, the lead doctor assured her. But he will need rest. The effects will wear off in 8 to 10 hours. Alani sat beside his bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. His color was better now, but he still looked weaker than she'd ever seen him. You should go back to the safe house, Ji-Hune said from the doorway. I will stay with him. I'm not leaving, Alani replied, not looking away from Wyan. Ji-Hune didn't argue. He just nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Hours later, Wyan's eyes fluttered open. It took him a moment to focus, to recognize where he was. When he saw Alani, surprise crossed his face. You're still here, he said, his voice rough. Of course I am. He tried to sit up, winced. What happened after? Security caught the guy. Ji-Hune is questioning him, but he says the man won't talk. Wyan's face darkened. He won't need to. We both know who sent him. Your uncle. Yes. Bitterness crept into his voice. And he got exactly what he wanted. Everyone saw me collapse. Helpless. Weak. They also saw you step in front of me, Alani pointed out. That's not weakness. That's strength. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or gratitude. Why did you do that? She asked. Put yourself between me and him? Wyan looked away. It was instinct. No, it wasn't. You made a choice. He didn't answer. But his hand moved across the blanket, stopping just short of hers. Not quite touching. Just close. They sat in silence for a while, the hospital machines beeping softly in the background. Outside the door, Alani knew Ji-hoon and other security personnel stood guard. The safety bubble was temporary at best. The attack changes things, Wyan finally said. My uncle has crossed a line. He won't stop now. So what do we do? His eyes closed briefly, like a man making a difficult decision. You go home. What? Back to Memphis. To your grandmother. His voice was gentle but firm. This isn't your fight, Alani. It never should have been. You can't just send me away. I can ensure your safety. I can fulfill my financial obligations. He opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. The contract is void. You'll still receive everything I promised, but you don't have to stay. And what happens to you? She asked. I handle my uncle my way. Alone. He nodded once. As I should have from the beginning. Alani stood, anger flaring suddenly. So that's it? You're just giving up on our plan? Letting him win? I'm being realistic, Wyan said, a hint of his usual authority returning to his voice. Tonight proved how dangerous this has become. I won't risk your life to save my position. That's not your decision to make, she insisted. I'm already involved. And I'm uninvolving you. His tone softened. Please understand. This is for your protection. I don't need protection. I need... Alani stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. What did she need? Safety, yes, but also something else. Something she wasn't ready to name. Wyan reached for her hand, finally bridging the distance between them. His fingers were cool against hers. I'll understand if you want out, he said quietly. The money is still yours. Your grandmother will still be taken care of. You can go home tomorrow. Alani looked down at their joined hands. His long fingers wrapped around hers. The first time he'd reached for her without panic or fear driving the gesture. She should have said yes. Any sensible person would have. She could walk away with the money, her grandmother safe at Sunrise Gardens, her debts paid. She could go back to her old life and pretend none of this ever happened. But she couldn't. Because somewhere between the fake vows and the real danger, something had changed. The way he looked at her during their dance. The way he'd put himself between her and that syringe without hesitation. The way his hand felt in hers right now. She wasn't ready to name it. Not yet. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going anywhere. And when the uncle came for her directly, and he would, she was going to be ready. Alani woke to a soft knocking sound. Not the regular knocks she'd gotten used to, not Ji-hoon's pattern of 3 quick taps, pause, then 2 more. She glanced at the bedside clock, 6:03 a.m. Wyan wasn't in bed. He'd left early for a meeting, trying to salvage business deals that were falling apart after the gala incident. The knocking came again, more insistent. Alani slipped out of bed and pulled on a robe. She'd gotten into the habit of sleeping in proper pajamas since moving to the safe house. You never knew when you might need to run. Moving quietly through the living room, she approached the door cautiously. Who is it? She called, not touching the handle. Mrs. Jang. The voice was smooth and familiar. Too familiar. A moment of your time, please. Uncle Sango. Alani's blood went cold. The safe house was supposed to be secret. How did he find them? She heard movement behind her and turned to see Ji-hoon emerging from the kitchen, gun already drawn. He motioned for her to step back from the door. Open with chain, he whispered. Alani nodded and unlocked the door but kept the security chain in place. Through the narrow gap, she could see Uncle Sango standing in the hallway. He wore a perfectly tailored suit despite the early hour. His silver-streaked hair was immaculate. He looked like he was going to a business meeting, not paying a surprise 6 a.m. visit. A pleasant surprise, Uncle, Alani said, keeping her voice steady. Wyan isn't here. I know. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It's you I came to see. Ji-hoon stepped up beside Alani, making himself visible in the gap. It's all right, Uncle Sango said, looking at the security man. I'm alone. I just want to speak with my nephew's wife. Family business. Ji-hoon looked at Alani. She nodded. It's okay. Let him in. She closed the door to remove the chain, then opened it fully. Uncle Sango stepped inside, carrying a thin leather portfolio under his arm. He glanced around the apartment, taking in every detail. Quite a step down from the penthouse, he observed. We like it better here, Alani replied. More homey. May we sit? He gestured to the living room. What I have to discuss is important. Alani led him to the couch. Ji-hoon positioned himself near the door, his hands still close to his weapon. Would you like coffee? Alani asked, more out of reflex than hospitality. No need for pretenses, Uncle Sango said, sitting down and placing the portfolio on the coffee table. I won't be staying long. Alani sat across from him, keeping her back straight, shoulders relaxed. Show no fear, Ji-hoon had taught her. I have a business proposition for you, Uncle Sango said without preamble. He opened the portfolio and slid a document across the table. $5 million. Transferred immediately to any account of your choosing. Alani stared at the paper but didn't touch it. And what would I have to do for that money? Simply tell the truth. His smile was cold, calculating. Sign a statement confirming your marriage to my nephew is a business arrangement. That he hired you because of his inability to maintain a real relationship. The insult was barely hidden. Alani felt anger rise in her chest. You want me to betray him? I want to offer you freedom. Uncle Sango leaned forward slightly. My nephew's position is already crumbling. The attack at the gala was just the beginning. When he falls, and he will fall, anyone close to him falls too. Is that a threat? A reality. He tapped the document with one manicured finger. $5 million is life-changing money. Enough to take care of your grandmother for the rest of her days. Enough to finish your education. Enough to never worry about money again. Alani looked at the document. $5 million. It was more money than she'd ever dreamed of having. More than Wyan had promised her in their original contract. All she had to do was tell the truth. Their marriage was fake. It had started as a business deal. But somehow, it had become something else. Something real. No, she said. Uncle Sango's smile faltered. I beg your pardon? I said no. Alani pushed the document back across the table. I'm not interested. Everyone has a price, Mrs. Jiang. Then you've miscalculated mine. She stood up, meeting his gaze without flinching. For a moment, the uncle's mask slipped. Real anger flashed in his eyes. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. Think of your grandmother. My grandmother taught me that some things can't be bought. Alani crossed her arms. And for the record, your nephew is more of a man than you'll ever be. He survived things that would have broken most people. You think that makes him weak? It makes him stronger than anyone in your world. Uncle Sango stared at her, his face hardening. He picked up the document and returned it to his portfolio. You will regret this decision, he said, standing. Maybe. Alani held her ground. But I'll regret it with my integrity intact. He moved to the door. Ji-hoon opened it for him, his expression giving away nothing. Before leaving, Uncle Sango turned back. Tell my nephew I came to visit. I'm sure he'll find it enlightening. Then he was gone. Ji-hoon closed the door behind him and immediately pulled out his phone, speaking rapid Korean. Calling for more security, Alani guessed. She sank back onto the couch, suddenly feeling the adrenaline crash. Her hands were shaking. $5 million. She'd just turned down $5 million. And she didn't regret it for a second. Wyan returned to the safe house earlier than expected. His face was tight with tension until he saw Alani. Then something else replaced the worry, relief. "You're here," he said, as if he'd half expected her to be gone. "Where else would I be?" She tried to keep her voice light. "Jihune called me. My uncle was here." Alani nodded. "He came to see me." "What did he want?" She told him everything, the early morning visit, the $5 million offer, her refusal. As she spoke, Wyan's expression changed from worry to something she couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe. Or wonder. When she finished, he sat beside her on the couch, closer than he usually did. "You turned down $5 million, he said, his voice soft. "I turned down betraying you," she corrected. "There's a difference." Wyan was quiet for a long moment, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. Then he reached for his briefcase. "I've been preparing for this," he said, pulling out a small flash drive. "Since my father died." "What is it?" "Evidence. Financial records showing how my uncle has been skimming from company accounts for the past 15 years. Properties he owns under his mistress's name. Payments to officials who would be very embarrassed if their connection to him became public." Alani stared at the tiny device. "Blackmail? Insurance?" Wyan turned the flash drive over in his fingers. "I never wanted to use it. He's still my father's brother. Still family. But now you're going to. He's left me no choice." Wyan's eyes hardened. "He attacked me at the gala. He threatened your grandmother. He tried to bribe you. He's crossed too many lines. What are you going to do?" Wyan stood, decision made. "We're going to see my uncle. Tonight." Uncle Sango's office was in a gleaming skyscraper in Seoul's financial district. The Han Group logo, sleek and modern, adorned the lobby. Security guards nodded to Wyan as he and Alani walked in, though their eyes showed surprise. The elevator took them to the top floor. More security guards stood outside the uncle's door, but they stepped aside for Wyan without question. They didn't knock. Uncle Sango was sitting behind a massive desk, reading something on his computer. He looked up, shock briefly crossing his face before he schooled his features back to neutrality. "Nephew." He glanced at his watch. "I wasn't expecting you. I heard you were still recovering." "I've recovered enough," Wyan replied. His voice was cold, controlled. He guided Alani to one of the chairs facing the desk, then sat beside her. A united front. "Mrs. Jang," Uncle Sango nodded to her. "Lovely to see you again so soon." "We need to talk," Wyan said, cutting through the fake pleasantries. He placed the flash drive on the desk between them. Uncle Sango stared at it. "What is this?" "Your retirement package." Wyan's voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of steel. "Everything you've been hiding for the past 15 years. The uncle's expression didn't change, but Alani saw his hand tighten slightly on his pen. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The accounts in Macau. The properties in your mistress's name. The payments to Judge Yoon and Commissioner Park." Wyan listed each item like he was reading a grocery list. 15 years of secrets, uncle. How do you think the family would react if they saw this? For the first time, Alani saw real fear in the uncle's eyes. Just a flash, quickly hidden. "You would expose your own family?" Uncle Sango asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "You tried to humiliate me in public," Wyan replied. "You threatened my wife's grandmother. You tried to bribe my wife to betray me. You crossed every line first." Uncle Sango looked between them, his mind clearly working through options, calculating risks. "What do you want?" he finally asked. Peace. Wyan leaned forward. You stop undermining me. Stop spreading rumors. Stop threatening those I care about. In return, this information stays private, and the family business continues as my father intended. You keep your position and your privileges. Nothing changes except your campaign against me. And if I refuse? Then we see which of us the family values more. The loyal son or the brother who's been stealing from them for 15 years. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Uncle Sango's eyes moved from Wyan to Alani, then back to the flash drive sitting on his desk. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. It seems I've underestimated you, nephew. There was something like grudging respect in his voice. And your wife. Do we have an agreement? Wyan asked, not acknowledging the almost compliment. Uncle Sango nodded once. We have an agreement. Wyan stood, buttoning his suit jacket with steady hands. I'll expect the contracts that were cancelled to be renewed by tomorrow. The surveillance on my wife's grandmother ends immediately. The rumors stop today. As you wish. Uncle Sango stood as well. Family dinner next month? For appearances. Send the details to my office. They turned to leave. Alani felt the uncle's eyes on her back, calculating, assessing. This isn't over, nephew, he called after them. Truces are temporary. Wyan didn't turn around. Then enjoy the temporary. In the elevator going down, Alani finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Do you think he'll honor the agreement? For now, Wyan replied. He has no choice. But he'll be looking for a way around it. Yes. Wyan's hand found hers, his fingers cool and steady. But we'll be ready. The next few weeks were the most peaceful Alani had experienced since coming to Seoul. The threats stopped. The surveillance ended. Wyan's business stabilized as contracts were renewed and partnerships reaffirmed. They even moved back to the penthouse after Wyan's security team swept it thoroughly for bugs and installed new security measures. Life fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Wyan worked during the day. Alani explored Seoul, learning the language, visiting museums and markets. They ate dinner together each night, talking about their days, getting to know each other beyond the contract that had brought them together. They still shared a bed. Neither mentioned it anymore. It was just how things were now. When Wyan had nightmares, which were becoming less frequent, Alani was there to wake him gently. When Alani couldn't sleep, missing her grandmother or worrying about the future, Wyan stayed up with her, telling her stories about growing up in Seoul. They weren't just pretending anymore. This was becoming real. One night, as they stood on the penthouse balcony looking out at the city lights, Wyan's phone buzzed with a message. He looked at it, his expression changing subtly. What is it? Alani asked. Nothing important. He put the phone away too quickly. Business. But Alani had seen the flash of concern in his eyes. That night, she woke up at 2 a.m. to find Wyan's side of the bed empty. She found him in his office, talking quietly on the phone in Korean. When he saw her in the doorway, he ended the call abruptly. Everything okay? She asked. Yes. Go back to sleep. But his eyes told a different story. Alani should have known better. Men like Uncle Sango didn't accept defeat. They waited. They planned. They struck when you least expected it. And the strike was coming. Not at Wyan this time. At her. 1 month after their showdown with Uncle Sango, life had settled into something that almost felt normal. Alani woke up to sunlight streaming through the penthouse windows. Wyan's side of the bed was empty, but that wasn't unusual. He often got up early to handle business calls before she woke. She stretched and smiled. So much had changed in the past month. The threats had stopped. The surveillance had ended. Wyan's business was back on track as contracts were renewed. They'd even moved back to the penthouse after his security team had swept it thoroughly for bugs. But the biggest change was between them. They still shared a bed. Neither mentioned it anymore, it was just how things were now. When Wyan had nightmares, Alani was there to wake him gently. When she couldn't sleep, missing her grandmother or worrying about the future, he stayed up with her, telling her stories about growing up in Seoul. The contract that had brought them together seemed less important with each passing day. Alani found Wyan in the kitchen, surprising her by making pancakes. He looked different at home, no suit, just jeans and a t-shirt, his hair not perfectly styled. "You weren't kidding about the pancakes," she said, watching him flip one perfectly. He glanced over his shoulder with that almost smile she'd grown to recognize. "I never kid about pancakes. Family tradition. They smell amazing. My mother's recipe." He slid a plate toward her. "Try." Alani took a bite and closed her eyes. "These are incredible. I told you." There was a hint of pride in his voice. As they ate breakfast together, Alani realized how comfortable this felt. How right. Like they weren't pretending anymore. "I need to go to the market today," she said. "I want to get ingredients for dinner. I thought I'd try cooking something." "Ji-hoon will go with you," Wyan said. It wasn't a question, just a fact. Even with the truce, security was still a constant. "I figured." She rolled her eyes, but there was no real annoyance behind it. "Your shadow follows me everywhere. He likes you, you know." Wyan sipped his coffee. "He says you're a fast learner. Good instincts." High praise from Mr. No Smile. Wyan's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression turning serious. "I need to head to the office. Contract signing." He stood and kissed her forehead quickly, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Be careful at the market. Stay with Ji-hoon." "I will." As he headed to the bedroom to change, Alani touched her forehead where his lips had been. They'd never discussed these small touches that had started happening. They just were. Neither of them knew that this peaceful morning would be the last one they would have for a long time. The local market was one of Alani's favorite places in Seoul. It was loud, colorful, and full of amazing smells. Old women called out to customers from their vegetable stands. Fish vendors displayed their fresh catches. Spice sellers created rainbows of powders and dried herbs. Ji-hoon walked a few steps behind her, scanning the crowd constantly. He never relaxed, not even for a second. "What about these?" Alani asked, holding up some vegetables at one stand. She was planning to cook a Korean dish she'd been practicing. Ji-hoon glanced at them. "Good. Fresh. Your Korean cooking lessons are paying off," she smiled. Something almost like a smile flickered across Ji-hoon's face before it disappeared back into his usual serious expression. They continued through the market, Alani's shopping bag growing heavier. She was excited about surprising Wyan with dinner. These small domestic moments had become precious to her. "Just need to stop at the fish stand," she said, turning down another crowded aisle. That's when it happened. A van screeched to a halt at the curb. Men in masks jumped out. Smoke bombs hit the ground, creating instant chaos. People screamed, ran, pushed past each other trying to escape. Ji-hoon shoved Alani behind him, drawing his gun in one smooth motion. "Run," he shouted. "Back exit." But it was too late. They were surrounded. 3 men in front, 2 behind. Ji-hoon fired. One attacker went down. He kicked another in the knee, the crack of bone audible even through the chaos. He fought like a demon, protecting her. But then a taser hit him in the neck. Ji-hoon dropped to the ground, his body convulsing. Alani didn't freeze. She'd been training for this. She slammed her elbow into the nose of the man who grabbed her. Felt the cartilage crunch. Used the heel of her hand to strike upward at another's throat. For a moment, she thought she might escape. Then a cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. The smell was sharp, chemical. The world went dark. Wyan was in the middle of a board meeting when his phone rang. He never took calls during meetings unless it was an emergency. When he saw Ji-Hune's name, he knew. "Excuse me," he said to the executives around the table. He stepped outside to answer. "Report." Ji-Hune's voice was slurred. Pained. "They took her. Market. 5 men. Professional." The world stopped. "Where are you?" Wyan's voice was deadly calm. "Still at market. Head injury. I failed. Medical team is coming. Tell me everything you saw." As Ji-Hune described the attack, something broke inside Wyan. The careful control he'd maintained his whole life. The mask he wore in public. It shattered. He walked back into the boardroom. The executives fell silent at the look on his face. With one hand, he flipped the heavy oak table onto its side. Papers flew. Coffee cups shattered. Men jumped back in shock. "Clear my schedule," he told his assistant, who stood frozen in the doorway. "And call Miho. Tell him to activate the ghost team." "Sir," Miho said, appearing from nowhere, "if we activate the ghost team, there's no going back to legitimate business. It will be war." Wyan straightened his tie, his eyes dead cold. "Let it burn," he said quietly. "If she's hurt, I'll burn this entire city to the ground." Alani woke up with a pounding headache. She was sitting upright, her hands zip-tied to the arms of a metal chair. The room was large and mostly empty, a warehouse of some kind. Light came from high windows. The smell of fish and salt water filled the air. They were near the docks. Awake at last. Uncle Sango sat across from her, looking as perfectly groomed as ever in his expensive suit. He was peeling an apple with a small knife, the red skin coming off in one long spiral. "You," Alani said, her voice hoarse. "We had an agreement." Agreements change when circumstances change. He cut a slice of apple and ate it calmly. "You've become a problem, Mrs. Jiang. By making your nephew happy. By making him strong." His eyes hardened. "Before you, he was manageable. Now he's becoming a threat." Alani tested the zip ties. "No give. So this is your solution? Kidnapping me? That's low even for you. This is business." He glanced at his watch. "I sent your husband a message. 1 hour to surrender his position and sign over the company. If he does, you live. If he doesn't." The knife glinted as he turned it in the light. "He won't sign," Alani said with confidence. "No? No. Because he knows I'd kill him myself if he gave up everything for me." Uncle Sango laughed, genuinely amused. "You continue to surprise me, Mrs. Jiang. I see why my nephew is so taken with you." Men with guns stood around the perimeter of the warehouse. Alani counted 8 of them. Too many. Even if she got free, she couldn't fight her way out. But she didn't need to fight. She just needed to survive until Wyan came. And he would come. She knew that with absolute certainty. "Your husband has 40 minutes left to decide," Uncle Sango said, checking his watch again. "I wonder what he'll choose. His birthright? Or his American wife? You don't know him very well if you think he can't find a way to keep both." Doubt flickered across the uncle's face, so brief she almost missed it. "Good. Let him wonder. Let him worry. Because Wyan wasn't just coming to negotiate. He was coming to end this." 40 minutes later, the warehouse lights cut out. "What's happening?" Uncle Sango shouted to his men. Power cut, sir. Well, fix it. Then came the sounds. Not gunshots. Gunshots were loud, obvious. These were the sounds of bodies hitting floors. Of bones breaking in the dark. Quick, efficient, almost silent. The emergency lights came on, casting an eerie red glow across the warehouse floor. 3 of the uncle's men were already down. The others looked around wildly, guns drawn. A spotlight from outside suddenly flooded through the windows, blinding everyone inside. Glass shattered as figures rappelled down from the skylight. And in the center of it all walked Wyan. He didn't look like a businessman anymore. He wore a black tactical vest over his shirt. His movements were fluid, precise. This wasn't the careful, controlled man Alani had married. This was the son of Han Soo-jong, raised in a world of power and violence. 2 guards rushed him. Wyan took down the first with a strike to the throat, the second with a sweeping kick that shattered his knee. He moved like water, each motion flowing into the next. Uncle Sango grabbed Alani's arm, pulling her up from the chair, the zip ties cutting into her wrists. He pressed his knife to her throat. Stay back, he shouted, his voice cracking. I'll do it. Wyan stopped 10 feet away. Blood on his knuckles. None of it his. Look at you, Uncle Sango sneered. Playing the hero. You're still the broken boy who cried in that basement. Wyan looked at Alani. Really looked at her. Saw the bruise on her cheek. The blood on her wrists where she'd fought the restraints. Something final snapped inside him. I am not that boy, he said, his voice deadly quiet. I am her husband. He nodded slightly. A single shot rang out from the catwalk above. Ji-hoon, his head bandaged but his aim perfect, had put a bullet through the knife in Sango's hand, shattering the blade. The uncle screamed, clutching his bleeding fingers. Alani didn't hesitate. She threw her weight backward, smashing the chair into Sango's foot. The zip ties cut into her wrists, but she didn't care. She rolled away, putting distance between herself and the uncle. Wyan was on him in an instant. He didn't kill him. That would have been too quick, too merciful. Instead, he pinned his uncle to the ground, forearm across his throat, pressing just hard enough to terrify, not to kill. You are finished, Wyan said, his voice ice cold. You will go to prison for kidnapping. For embezzlement. For attempted murder. You'll live a long, miserable life knowing you lost to the broken man. Security personnel swarmed in, taking control of the uncle's remaining men. Wyan went to Alani, cutting the zip ties with a knife. His hands were gentle despite the violence they'd just delivered. Are you hurt? He asked, scanning her for injuries. Alani looked around at the warehouse. At the men on the ground. At the blood. At this side of Wyan she'd never seen before. And strangely, she wasn't afraid. Not of him. Never of him. I'm okay, she said. But you ruined another suit. A surprised laugh escaped him, brief, breathless. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. Let's go home, he whispered. The scandal of Uncle Sango's arrest rocked Seoul's business world. The charges were extensive: kidnapping, embezzlement, attempted murder, criminal conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. The flash drive Wyan had threatened to use became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. But the Han group didn't fall. Instead, it grew stronger as Wyan took full control. He moved quickly to transform the company, shutting down the illegal operations, focusing on legitimate businesses, shipping, real estate, technology. A week after the rescue, Alani found Wyan in his office late at night. He was looking at old photos, his father, his mother, himself as a young boy. Are you okay? She asked, sitting beside him. I've been thinking about my father, he said. About what he wanted for the family. For me. He touched one of the photos. He always said our power should come from respect, not fear. He'd be proud of what you're doing now. Wyan looked at her, really looked at her. When I saw you in that warehouse, when I thought I might lose you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Alani took his hand. You didn't lose me. I'm right here. The contract. He started. I don't care about the contract anymore, she said. Do you? Instead of answering, he leaned forward and kissed her. Really kissed her. Not the forehead kisses or cheek kisses they'd shared over the past month. A real kiss, full of everything they'd been afraid to say. When they pulled apart, his eyes were filled with wonder. It's working, he whispered. I can feel. Alani placed her hand on his cheek. I told you. It was never about physical damage. It was about trust. That night, the last barrier between them fell away. The fake marriage that had started as a business arrangement had become the most real thing in either of their lives. 3 months after Uncle Sango went to prison, Alani woke up to the smell of coffee and pancakes. She stretched in bed, smiling at how much had changed. The Han Group was transforming under Wyan's leadership. He'd shut down the illegal operations and focused on legitimate businesses. The company was actually making more money now than before. They'd moved into a new penthouse, one they'd picked out together. It felt like a real home, not just a fancy showroom. There were photos on the walls now. Books left open on tables. Signs of life. Alani had started taking Korean lessons. She could now order food, ask for directions, and even argue with taxi drivers when they tried to overcharge her. She'd also enrolled in online business classes, finishing the degree she'd had to abandon to care for her grandmother. On weekends, they explored Korea together. Sometimes with Ji-hoon and security tagging along, sometimes just the two of them when they went to places Wyan knew were safe. And every Sunday morning, they cooked breakfast together. Wyan making his mother's pancakes. Alani brewing coffee. They were happy. But one thing still troubled them. One final barrier remained. The trauma that had broken Wyan 3 years ago still cast a shadow. The doctors had said some damage was permanent, not just physical, but psychological. And despite the growing closeness between them, Wyan was terrified that his body would fail him when it mattered most. They slept in the same bed every night now. No more pillow wall. They held each other. Kissed. But never crossed that final line. Until the night of the storm. It was the worst thunderstorm Seoul had seen in years. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder shook the building. Lightning turned night to day in blinding flashes. Alani woke up around midnight to find Wyan's side of the bed empty. She found him in the living room, standing by the window, watching the storm. His hands were trembling slightly. The thunder, he said without turning around. It sounds like. He didn't need to finish. She knew. It sounded like the basement where they'd kept him. Like the start of another session of pain. She went to him. Stood beside him. Took his hand. Talk to me, she said. For a long moment, he was silent. Then, so quietly she almost didn't hear it over the storm. I'm afraid. It was the first time he'd ever said those words out loud. Afraid of what? She asked gently. That I can't be what you deserve. He turned to face her, pain in his eyes. That I'll never be whole again. What do I deserve, Wyan? Someone better. Someone unbroken. Alani reached up and touched his face. You are exactly what I deserve. Not despite what happened to you. Because of it. Because of how you survived. Because of who you became. His eyes were wet in the dim light. What if I try and fail? Then we try again. And again. She stepped closer. There's no failure between us, Wyan. There's only us. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face. The fear. The hope. I love you, she said for the first time. All of you. The broken parts too. Alani. His voice broke on her name. She kissed him. Soft at first. A question. He froze for a moment, the old fear rising. But she didn't pull away. She waited. Patient. Present. And slowly, something shifted. The wall he'd built 3 years ago began to crack. His arms came around her. The kiss deepened. For the first time since that basement, his body responded. Not with fear. With trust. It's working, he whispered against her lips, sounding amazed. I can feel you. I told you, she said. It was never about physical damage. It was about trust. That night, as the storm raged outside, the last barrier between them fell. They were no longer pretending. They were real. 6 months later, Alani stood on their balcony, watching the Seoul skyline shimmer in the winter sun. The air was crisp, making her breath fog. Wyan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. His chin rested on her shoulder. You're thinking too loud, he murmured. She smiled. I was thinking about the contract. The one we tore up? Yeah. Clause 4, Section B. Wyan's brow furrowed. What was that one? Alani turned in his arms, her smile growing wider. Production of an heir. He went completely still. His eyes searched her face. Alani? I took the test this morning, she said softly. The man who thought he was broken. The man who believed his family line would end with him. The man who had built walls around his heart because he was afraid of being destroyed again. He fell to his knees in front of her. He pressed his face against her stomach. His shoulders began to shake. And he wept. Not from sorrow. From joy so overwhelming he couldn't contain it. Thank you, he whispered. For the fake marriage. For the real love. For saving me. Alani ran her fingers through his hair. I told you, Mr. Jang. When I signed that paper, there was no walking away. 2 weeks later, they flew to Memphis. Sunrise Gardens looked beautiful in the afternoon light. The trees were turning golden. The pond reflected the clear blue sky. Alani's grandmother sat on her favorite bench, wrapped in a warm sweater despite the mild weather. She looked stronger than she had in years. The good care and medicine had worked wonders. When she spotted Alani and Wyan walking toward her, hands intertwined, a knowing smile spread across her face. Nana, Alani said, kneeling beside the bench. We have something to tell you. Loretta looked at them. At the way Wyan stood protectively behind her granddaughter. At the light in Alani's eyes. At how they couldn't stop touching each other. You don't need to tell me anything, she said, her eyes filling with tears. I can see it. They told her anyway. About the baby. About their love. About their future in Seoul but with regular visits to Memphis. Loretta reached out and took Wyan's hand, surprising him. You take care of my girls, she said firmly. Wyan nodded, his face solemn. With my life, Mrs. Booker. Call me Nana, she said. You're family now. Later that evening, they walked through Beale Street together. The neon lights were just coming on. Blues music poured from open doors. The air smelled like barbecue and beer. Wyan stopped outside the Blue Note, the club where Alani had worked. Where she'd first served him. This is where I first saw you, he said quietly. When I waited on your table? No. He looked almost shy. 3 years before that. I was in Memphis on business. It was raining. An elderly woman fell on the sidewalk right there. He pointed to a spot near the curb. I remember that, Alani said, surprised. I helped her up. Called her a taxi. You paid for it with your own money, Wyan continued. Even though your umbrella was broken and you got soaked. Alani stared at him. You saw that? You never told me. I fell in love with you that night, he said simply. Before I knew your name. Before I knew anything about you. I saw someone who cared about people nobody else noticed. And I knew. Knew what? That if I ever found the courage to speak to you, you might be the one to save me. Alani felt tears in her eyes. She pulled him into a kiss, right there on Beale Street. With the saxophone playing and the neon lights glowing and the whole world watching. From a waitress drowning in debt to the wife of one of Korea's most powerful men. From a fake contract to a real family. From broken pieces to a whole heart. Alani Booker didn't just survive the Mafia boss. She healed him. And he, in turn, healed her. Some stories end with happily ever after. But this one ends with something better. It ends with finally. Finally free. Finally loved. Finally home. And that's where we leave Alani and Wyan. Not at an ending, but at a beginning. If this story moved you, if it made you hold your breath, or smile, or feel something real, then you're exactly the kind of person I create these stories for. I want to thank you for staying until the very end. Not everyone makes it this far, but you did. And that means you're part of this community. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single comment, and I want to hear from you. What was your favorite part of this story? What kind of story would you like to hear next? Until then, take care of yourself. And remember, sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with a contract and end with a heartbeat. See you in the next story.